I'm Ryan O'Dowd, and this is the Black Hand Communique. Today's episode is called People Power versus Money Power. And you'll have to excuse me if I'm a little more listless than usual. I'm having some intestinal problems today. Anyway, what this episode is going to be about is what people power truly is and what can happen if the people become aware of it. Um, I'm a little bit smiling because this episode makes me feel like a 60s radical or something like that. And there's a certain kind of joy in feeling like I'm digging up that grave to try to resurrect it. Of course, you can't resurrect movements really. You have to recreate. You have to create new ones based on some of the premises of the old ones. But the idea of people power is something that was very much popular, in the 60s in Western Europe and America. And I think it's direly needed to be resurrected in today's world. And here's why. The people have an enormous, unbridled potential energy to them. If you think about just the United States, there's like 350 million approximately people in this country. Um, the vast majority of which are doing some kind of productive or commercial activity every single day. Even if they don't meet, the right wing criteria of employed, they're still purchasing things or need things purchased for them. They're still doing something that changes matter from one form to another. And there's just this tremendous, you could even say, thermo dynamic power to the people themselves. And right now, it's very well contained compared to historical, precedent. Because even though we have these hundreds of millions of people that are consuming and producing, there's so little active working discontent in our country and even in Europe compared to the past. Like take Greece for example. When the IMF and ECB and Bank of Berlin shoved austerity down their throats in August, and the people voted a referendum to reject austerity outright, Alex Tsipras and the ruling Syriza party, claiming to be a left-wing party, which essentially means at its core it's some kind of collective or cooperative people's party, just said fucking shrug and shoved down the austerity down people's throats anyway. And from a European point of view, that's asinine that happened without major, major, major protest. Um, I think the people in Europe and in America have lost their way. They've forgotten their power. They've forgotten it, and it's been systematically removed from them. I know in the United States, at least in our media, the entire notion of, if you, I think it's coming back, but I think if for a while, if you said power to the people on TV, it would be a joke. It would be like you're a caricature of another era or something like that. I think that there's been this subtle and insidious takeover of the popular narrative to say, that direct action and people power is antiquated and old fashioned. You're a hippie. It's very unpragmatic. They love to say it's idealistic and unpragmatic when it's anything but. And the fact that it's infected Europe to the point that the Greek people didn't call a general strike is almost beyond me, because Europe's got a vast history of revolution and people's uprisings. And they used to know anyway. And I thought they still knew that when push comes to shove, who really holds the power is the people. Why? Because the people will enforce it. But there does seem to have been a commercial, almost you could call it a marketing strategy, to just kind of associate this kind of radicalism and people power with, rolling your eyes. Oh, he's got an afro. Oh, he's wearing a tie-dye shirt, or he's fucking wearing Roman style sandals and kumbaya and all that bullshit. But that is not what people power is about at all. In fact, that could be a whole nother episode. But the hippies were a countercultural, hedonistic, essentially subculture, and they were not the core of what people power was about in the 60s. They were more of a dropout culture, which capitalism would prefer to real people power. And let me get at the core of this now, because the power of the people is evidenced in this country. You're asked if I love my country. Yes, I do. And I love the people in my country, the people themselves, the culture. Not everything about it, but I do. And the power of the people is expressed in the skyscrapers, It's expressed in the superhighways. It's expressed in solar fields and the Hoover Dam. And it's expressed in these monumental, even commercial edifices, because the people were required to build them. The people in the form of architects to design them, the people in the form of carpenters, electricians, to do the middle-in work, and even the day laborers who just held up the sheetrock and nailed it in. All of them are required to build everything in this country, intellectually and physically, and you might even say spiritually, that we've got. So you can see, if you don't believe in the power of the people, walk through your downtown of a city. That's the power of the people. But the difference is, that's the power of the people when it has been reined in, cajoled, and very carefully filtered and manipulated towards specific commercial and productive ends. Now, imagine that same power in the hands of the people themselves. All right? Because right now, you could see the productive power and the will of the people in the amazing industry of the United States. And I think personally, I'm on the green side of things. I think we actually have to cut back on growth. But the point I'm making is we are one hell of an industrial power, or at least we were for a very long time. And that's because of the power of the people being controlled and strewn and manipulated towards specific ends by people with money. The money people use their money and their influence to then manipulate the people towards their commercial ends to exploit them. Now imagine if that same power was liberated from being exploited and was back in the hands of the people themselves. So instead of working at Lockheed Martin to build missiles to kill people in Iraq, what if people simply awakened? I hate saying wake up, awaken, because it's such a cliche nowadays, but it's appropriate here. What if they just realized that the ritualization of their life that is all around them in the form of employment, the state, apparatus, bureaucracy, religion, the complete ritualization of their life and commodification of their life, where they see even their own time as something to be bought and sold. What if they just became aware that that's exactly what it is, a ritual and a commodity, and that is therefore an invention of the human mind, and is therefore able to be critiqued and improved by the human mind, or even flatly rejected by the human mind? And what if the people realized that, and realized they truly have the ability, literally, not as an ideal, but they literally have the power to just step outside of the system, to just say, nope, and then build something else where it was. I know that it sounds simplistic, but it's logical and it's pragmatic, because it's actually much less pragmatic to have a tiny minority of people constantly trying to use this energy for their own ends than to have the people simply become aware that their life is theirs and to step aside and say no. That is the power of people. When the people become aware that they can just step aside, just say, nah, no thanks. That is when we will see the beginning of a great social revolution. And I'm not talking about a civil war or a coup d'etat or cataclysm. I'm talking about the productive energies of the entire Western world simply through a switch of perspective, transferring from the power of banks and military elites, politicians, kings and queens, capitalists, to people themselves, just by realizing it and just stepping aside and saying, no, I'm not going to do it anymore. This has been called People Power versus Money Power. I'm Ryan O'Dowd of the Black Hand Communique, saying, power to the people.